What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to break down why tomorrow is going to be a very interesting day for all Tesla investors because Tesla does have some very bullish signals developing, and it's likely going to see a bullish continuation. But at the same time, the overall market is actually lagging behind a bit, and we might see that actually slow Tesla down a little bit. I'm also going to break down what's going on with the overall market, what the data is suggesting, and the technicals. But before I do that, before I give you guys any price predictions and talk about Tesla, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last things, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each valued at up to $3,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends in just one day. It ends tomorrow, so make sure you check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So, anyways, with that all said, I want to mention that Tesla's up over 5.46% for the day. I mentioned yesterday that when you zoom out of the chart, Tesla's been respecting a bit of a downtrend for quite a while, but I did predict yesterday that Tesla would get a nice breakout to the upside and actually break above $200 and likely start to test 205. I also mentioned that if we broke 205, Tesla would likely see 209, and we could get rejected off there because that's where the resistance is. So remember, there's 200, then there's 205, then 209 as the major resistance levels. 209 happens to be the stronger one of the three. So I want to now note what I do expect to happen for tomorrow. Because look, Tesla's looking strong. We have some bullish momentum, and it's likely going to continue pushing, but the overall market is weakening a bit. We are actually seeing another downtrend being respected on SPY. It got a nice gap up in the very beginning of the day, followed by a bit of a downturn, and it is getting very close to filling the gap it developed a couple of days ago. It hasn't fully filled the gap, so it might come down a little more before we do see a bounce, possibly. And I do want to break down how this will affect Tesla a little bit later. But to start us off, we have Investor Day in just a couple of days, and there's so much hype, there's so much excitement, and that's why Tesla's starting to outperform the market. Now, what else is worth noting though is many analysts are giving some different perspectives about what they expect for the big event. Now, just as a reminder, Tesla has Investor Day on March 1st, so we're just a couple of days away in Giga, Texas. Now, when it comes to this big event, Tesla's going to talk about expansion efforts and things like that. I did mention a lot of this yesterday in my video, but I want to mention that some analysts are also talking about the fact that the recent global price cuts have driven demand. They're mentioning the fact that Tesla likely needs the Gen 3 to maintain a 50% delivery compound annual growth rate, and at the same time they're expected to see a $30,000 EV announced or a plan for it to help Tesla maintain their goals and continue growing at a faster rate. They're mentioning the fact that right now, this is what the analyst from Wells Fargo said, Tesla is in a position where they may need to continue to lower their costs and also prices to continue to see very, very awesome growth. Now, that is very possible and very likely in this current economy. And that's part of why Tesla did actually cut some prices very recently. But the thing is, and this is what's very different about it, is I don't fully agree with that. I think for the most part, he does have a very good point. Where I do disagree somewhat is based off something Elon Musk liked on his Twitter page. Elon Musk liked this and also retweeted this. It basically states that Tesla's brand loyalty will soon be number one across all brands, not just for topping Ford. Now, I do believe Tesla would benefit greatly if they give us a $30,000 EV, but I'm not necessarily going to see that as the only way for Tesla to maintain their goals because they have a huge brand. The loyalty of the brand and consumers is super high. They've actually topped Ford in terms of brand loyalty. In my opinion, Tesla could still do fantastic even if they have like more $40,000 cars coming out or things like that. They could still do very, very well, in my opinion, and still reach their goals. They don't need a $30,000 EV. But if they do end up announcing it, that would be very awesome during Investor Day. Now, on top of that, I do believe Tesla's going to give us a better like financial estimate of how things are going, how they plan on reducing costs and things like that. Elon Musk is also going to announce the Master Plan 3. Once again, very good for their expansion efforts. And the future of the company going forward. I also want to mention the fact that the Mexican president spoke with Elon Musk this morning, and that makes me think they might have a new location in mind for the Gigafactory in Mexico. I'm going to call it Giga Mexico. I haven't really heard anyone use that, but in my opinion, that's going to be very, very bullish news. If that does end up coming out, right now we're just waiting for confirmation on the location. We don't actually have it just yet. There's a chance Tesla knows what it's going to be now. Now that Tesla actually and Elon Musk did actually speak with the president, they could have a big announcement coming out involving this, and that could be very bullish news. We'll just have to wait and see, though. When it comes to earnings for the markets, there's actually not a whole ton coming out. We do actually have Tuesday having AMC coming out tomorrow. It's going to be very interesting. So will Target and lots of other retailers out there. We have Rivian coming out tomorrow alongside Neo, and I think Neo's earnings will be very, very fun to watch as well. Neo has a very amazing amount of potential, but their last quarter for Q4 wasn't that great. In my opinion, they did have to lower the guidance. So once again, there is some fear that their profitability might not be at the same level they want it to be. But at the same time, I'm still very bullish on Neo long term, and I do think Neo will come back. But anyways, when it comes to Tesla, right? This is a Tesla channel, not a Neo channel. When it comes to Tesla, we're also getting a $412 million worth of tax breaks, right? On the new $3.6 billion investment they've made in Nevada. And I see this as a very good thing because of the fact that the tax breaks not just incentivize Tesla to invest more over there to build their semis, but I believe that this is actually a win-win from both sectors. And I say that because of the fact that now in Nevada, when you see this much money pouring in to the state, we're going to see more and more jobs being created over there. We're going to see more and more people benefiting from the trade off. But at the same time, this will benefit Tesla as well. And it does actually lead to more incentives. Going back in more specific details about it, we're actually seeing three categories of the tax reductions. First off, we have $66.6 million of sales tax reduction. I'm sorry, guys. And then $17.6 million worth of modified business tax reductions, and then $246 million personal and real property tax reductions. So once again, very awesome stuff for Tesla. I'm very proud of them, and I do believe this will help them with expansion efforts. Now, there has been some negative news about Tesla, and that's because of the fact that Tesla disappoints owners with the updated language around the full self-driving beta. Now, what's important about that is the fact that the NHTSA basically had this big recall for Tesla, if you want to call it that. It basically just needed a giant software update for over 400,000 Tesla EVs, where I think it was closer to like 360,000. And what happened was Tesla worked very hard to improve their products and actually meet the demands of the NHTSA. Now, as a result of that, the updated interface right now is kind of confusing for a lot of drivers. So I do believe that this is something Tesla will work on. But what I love about Tesla is how hard they're working and actually willing to help their investors and customers. I believe Tesla is going to hear this. A lot of investors and customers may complain about this, and they will make improvements to how this actually looks. But I do believe that there's still a lot of work to be done, and that's not a major thing that came out, but it is worth noting. As far as inventory levels go, we saw a slight increase in inventory levels, not really that big compared to the overall chart, and we are still seeing a lot of Teslas being bought up pretty quickly. So once again, that's bullish data for us. We also saw 4,000 Model Ys built at the Giga Berlin this week. Once again, expanding more and more and more. That's even more bullish news for Tesla. I'm very excited. As far as volume goes, what's interesting about this is I'm going to reload this to double check that this is right. Tesla's volume isn't actually that high. It's actually looking that way. Tesla's overall volume ended up being at over, looking at it, 160 million. That's actually quite lower than the average volume. So we're not getting the same crazy buying pressures what we got on average last week. But at the same time, Tesla was dropping on a higher volume too. So the same buying and selling pressure wasn't as high. It doesn't matter as much because this tells me that it doesn't require as much volume for Tesla to make a big move. So if Tesla does get the same amount of volume as it typically does, or what it's been getting last week, especially the crazy amount of buy orders that retail likes to FOMO into, I believe the share price could turn even more bullish because of that, right? That's a very, very good sign for us in a way because it doesn't require as much volume to move this thing as it did before. Now, the short volume percentage dropped to about 48% today, meaning that the majority of the volume was buying pressure, people going long. That in turn is telling me that there's a lot of interest in the stock right now, and we're likely going to see a bullish continuation. On top of that, the put to call ratio is 0.74. If I was a market maker, I would be incentivized to cause some pain for a lot of the calls because the majority of investors are in calls right now for Tesla. So the market makers are not liking this. The market makers are likely going to try to cause Tesla to drop towards the end of the week, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen because if Investor Day does lead to some very, very bullish news from Tesla, if some very awesome things are announced, Tesla could continue to climb and it could actually hurt the market makers, right? Even though that is kind of rare, it is still very possible for a monster like Tesla that gets so much buying pressure. Overall, the price pairs ratio is continuing to climb. Tesla is still doing very well from that end. We're still climbing very well, and Wells Fargo is still very bullish on Tesla. On Tuesdays, Tesla tends to be green about 50.84% of the time. So the majority of the time we tend to be green, and we tend to see bigger pushes by now like the 12 o'clock like hour going into like a typical trading day, and also a little bit later as the days go on. I also want to note that the overall short interest did increase a little bit. It's still very low compared to these other times right here when shorts were recovering. I think that shorts are still waiting for Tesla to make a big pump to actually pile in, or they're maybe not going to try shorting it as hard. Maybe they actually know something about the news coming out for the big event. Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see on that. But now I want to transition into what the technicals are telling us. Looking at the overall market, when we zoom out, we can see that we've been riding the top of this like wedge that was developing on SPY, and I do believe we're likely going to continue to ride it and actually see a bit of a break to the downside on SPY, a slight break to the downside all the way down to the 396 to 395 level, and we're likely going to try to hold this level, maybe even bounce off of it going into tomorrow. However, overall momentum from this push up that we got today is weakening and it's not looking that strong. So I'm anticipating that we're likely going to continue to come down, maybe try to bounce back into this range and just trade kind of sideways. I don't really see too much coming out of SPY for the time being. And I don't think it's going to have as big of an effect on Tesla. But I do want to note that SPY is not extremely strong. Notice how last week we saw this thing at around like 407. We saw this thing hitting 402, and today we actually got rejected off 401. So it is still technically downtrending. And if we want to turn bullish, we need a clean break above 401. However, we are getting some bullish signals suggesting that that could still happen, and that can also help Tesla. And that's because of the VIX right now. The VIX right now is actually on the verge of filling its gap, and it hasn't actually fully filled its gap. So now that SPY is like kind of downtrending, I do think there's actually an increased probability of a bit of a bounce, but we need to see that happen very soon in order for this to play out. Now, this is telling me that maybe SPY is going to bounce. Maybe SPY will downtrend and then bounce very soon because I don't think the downtrend is necessarily done. I think we're going to continue dropping and maybe see a slight bounce. It's very likely we might try that. And what's going to happen is if we do get a bounce, the VIX is going to get dragged down even more, and it's likely going to come all the way down to the 19s. If that happens, that's going to be bullish for the stock market. I also want to remind everyone that Tesla does tend to reflect how the market ends up moving. I'm going to show you that in a couple of seconds. If you look at Tesla, like for example, you take Tesla right here, and you put it right next to SPY like this on like the 5-minute time frame, you could see they do have some similarities. I know Tesla was outperforming, Tesla was holding up very well, but look at the 5-minute time frame. Zooming out like this, Tesla was basically breaking out. We got a nice push in the very beginning. We slowed down. We got a second push, and we still closed pretty well. But if you compare this to SPY, look at the price action right here. Notice how SPY got a nice push up in the morning, as did Tesla. SPY started downtrending. So did Tesla for a little bit. Then SPY started a nice uptrend. During this time frame, Tesla outperformed SPY, got a really nice uptrend, and it actually broke its high. So Tesla was a lot stronger. Then SPY started to slow down, and Tesla also did something very similar. We slowed down just a little bit. We dropped like $2. Not necessarily that bad for Tesla, showing how much it's outperforming the market. On the triple Q, it was almost identical to SPY, very similar to Tesla as well. You can see how they actually affect one another, except Tesla is holding up way better. So this really displays how strong Tesla is relative to the market, right? I just wanted to make that as clear as possible. But the VIX is telling us that the market might bounce. It's going to likely come down tomorrow and then bounce and maybe try to come all the way back up to 400 on SPY, and the triple Q might continue to push too, which means Tesla will likely see a nice bounce too and more upside. On the triple Q, we actually have two gaps. There's one gap all the way up here, which is where our supply zone is between 300 and 301. I believe the triple Q is either going to fill these gaps. I think that it's first going to come down a little bit. And this is why I was mentioning some potential downside. It might come down just a little bit, drop a couple of dollars, maybe like $2 tomorrow, get a really nice bounce. It might actually bounce around this 291, 291, 292 level, then get a nice push up, get a nice breakout, and then slowly but surely come all the way up and eventually fill the gap to 300. That could still happen. Even though it's a little unlikely, it still is very possible. And I think this thing might get dragged up by Tesla. Tesla might be the thing that causes this thing to run. On top of that, I'm not going to talk too much about Microsoft and Meta, but they do have similar trends right now. Uh, there is this gap up here. I do think Microsoft is going to try to go for it, telling me that we could see the NASDAQ try to push up too. We're seeing similar trends in Apple and many different stocks up here. We do have these gaps up here. I think Apple's going to come down a little bit, try to fill this gap tomorrow, meaning the market might come down a little bit, and then we might get a bit of a bounce after that. And then we might start to fill these gaps well above. The dollar came down a bit with the market, which is a little bit surprising. It actually went almost exactly where my support zone was drawn out, 104.64. So what the dollar is telling me is overall, the trend is still bullish. It still is strong and bullish, but it was due for a bit of a pullback after pushing up for so many days in a row. So I do believe the dollar might come all the way down to the 104 area, but it's going to start to consolidate up here and likely get a bit of a bounce to drag the market down later on. So what does this tell me about the markets? For the short term, the market's likely going to balance and hold up as it has been overall. But for the medium term, I think the dollar is going to continue with the uptrend, and the stock market's going to likely see more downside for the medium term, maybe because of CPI in just about 2.5 weeks or other factors. Finally, with the 10-year Treasury yield in the NASDAQ, let me just talk about the NASDAQ first. The NASDAQ right now tried to actually get a push up, got rejected off this key level. It might try to fill this gap a little bit below it, and then try to see a bounce around this zone, maybe a little higher. And if that's the case, once again, could be bullish for Tesla. The 10-year Treasury yield, and this is the last thing I'm going to talk about before I talk about Tesla, this is actually coming down to the level I mentioned. I was mentioning to you guys that this 38.6 to about 39 level is going to be key. We actually came all the way down to about 38.9, and we are actually seeing this thing dropping a little bit more. If it does continue to come to this key level, it might try to get a nice bounce and try to make its way back above resistance to slowly get all the way up to 40 and then to fill the gap. What that means is the stock market might push up a little bit as this thing comes down a little bit more. But later on, this thing is likely going to bounce and continue with the uptrend, which in turn is going to cause the market to come down for the medium term. That's what this is basically suggesting. What does all of this data mean for Tesla? All right. Tesla's strong, it's bullish. However, I think if the market does come down a bit, it might slow Tesla down a little bit too. I'm thinking that, look, we might see Tesla actually pull back a little bit into the daytime. It might first like pop just at the very first few minutes, try to get above 209, then it's going to likely slow down, in my opinion. It could even turn a little bit red, but it's going to likely hold pretty well. And then if the buying pressure comes as the day goes on, I think later during the day, maybe after like an hour or two, Tesla's going to retest 209. It's going to slowly just fight it, and eventually break and likely come all the way up to maybe like 212 or so, maybe a little higher. It's going to try to fight above 209, in my opinion. And we're likely going to see this thing once again slow down a little bit and maybe close somewhat green once again, maybe a little bit above 210. I could actually see that happen. And I am going to talk about this because we're getting very close to the supply zone around this 215 to 217 area. I do believe Tesla badly wants to get all the way up there, but we have to be very cautious at the same time. The reason I want to be cautious is because the market is slowing down a bit. The market might slow down a bit and then bounce. And if that happens, once again, that could slow Tesla down and cause some volatility, some sideways action here and there before a bullish continuation later on. Overall, I do believe Tesla is going to continue to outperform the market. So even if we don't worry about the day-to-day basis, as we get closer to Investor Day, which is going to be on Wednesday, I believe Tesla is going to fight this 215 to 217 area, and we are eventually going to get there. I also think that there's an increased probability Tesla trying to break 217 and possibly get all the way up to almost 220 and fight a major resistance zone all the way up there. You also have to remember that on the daily time frame, Tesla has not even touched the 200 moving average, and we're slowly getting closer and closer and closer to it, which is currently at about 221. So I believe Tesla might try to get to 220 as we get closer to Investor Day, maybe a little bit after Investor Day. It is possible, but after that, we'd have to be very cautious. With that said, I am seeing more upside for Tesla. But for tomorrow, I expect some sideways action, some consolidation, maybe even it to come down just a little bit temporarily before the day goes on and Tesla eventually retests 209 to break it and maybe get closer to about 212 or so and close a little bit in the green once again. I'm seeing that for tomorrow, and I do believe it's going to continue climbing as the days go on. But once again, remember to be very, very cautious because there's that saying, buy the rumor, sell the news. All right. Even if Tesla has a really nice and very optimistic looking investor day, if all expectations are not met, things could change after investor day in terms of the price action, in terms of the hype, and etc. So once again, like what happens during major events, stocks could still slow down. Please be very cautious. With that said, thank you all so much for listening. I'm bullish for the near term. I just wanted to put all this out there. I want to thank all of you for listening. Tesla to the moon because the long term future is still incredibly bright. And peace out.